Tonight, the Prime Minister warns he'll hold police accountable over a pro-Palestine march due to take place on Armistice Day. Rishi Sunak summons ahead of London's Met Police to a meeting, but appears to accept the march will go ahead on Saturday. I'll be speaking live to Work and Pensions Minister Laura Trott to ask if the Prime Minister's been forced to accept that people do have the right to protest, whether he likes it or not. And after a shadow minister quits Keir Starmer's front bench over the Gaza conflict, we'll ask if the Labour leader can keep his team together. Plus, at the COVID inquiry, the UK's former top civil servant says he wanted the then Health Secretary Matt Hancock sacked. All that and more with Liam Fox and Owen Jones will be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, this time 4 weeks ago, I sat here on the Politics Hub and I said that Suella Braverman's speech to Conservative Party conference sounded like a leadership pitch. Well, the last month has felt a lot like we're in the middle of the campaign itself. The Home Secretary is chucking soundbites and headline grabbers all over the place. The pro-Palestinian protests are hate marches. Anyone who vandalises the cenotaph will be jailed faster than their feet can touch the ground. Being homeless is a lifestyle choice. Now, you might be thinking, come on, that doesn't look like a campaign to me. She's alienating as many voters as she's appealing to. But remember the audience she's trying to win over. The voters that matter to her are Conservative Party members. And it does feel like right now, the Conservative Parliamentary Party is dancing to Suella's tune. She's setting the music, she's in control of the playlist. And that means that Conservative MPs like Laura Trott, who's on the show tonight, constantly having to respond to the latest track that Suella's chosen, whether they like it or not. First tonight, we can get up to date with where we are and what is happening with the protests this weekend. Here is our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt.
There have been 4 weeks of pro-Palestine protests.
Stop bombing Gaza!
Lots of chants and flags, but very little disorder. The odd flash of violence was quickly dealt with. One thing the Prime Minister and the Met Commissioner do agree on is the potential for serious disorder at a march on Saturday, Armistice Day. The Commissioner insists the threat so far isn't huge and his officers can cope.
The remembrance events will not be disturbed. Whatever protests and other events go on, we will do our utmost to protect those because they are so critical. If over the next few days the intelligence evolves further and we get to such a high threshold, and it's only been done once in a decade, where we need to say to the Home Secretary we think it's got to the stage we need to ban the march element, then of course we will do.
The Prime Minister doesn't want the protest to go ahead and made his thoughts clear.
This is a decision that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has made. Now, my job is to hold him accountable for that, and we've asked the police for information on how they will ensure that this happens. You know, my view is that these marches are disrespectful, and that's what I'll be discussing with the Police Commissioner later today.
At lunchtime, the Home Secretary went to Downing Street. The Prime Minister had ordered the Commissioner there to explain his decision not to challenge the protest. Later, the PM said he got assurances the march would not clash with remembrance events, but a risk remained.
The two men are clearly at loggerheads over the protest. The Prime Minister wants the Commissioner to ask the Home Secretary for a ban. The Commissioner insists that would be a rare move, and any ban would apply only to a march, not to a static demonstration.
At 11 a.m. on Armistice Day, a 2-minute silence will be observed at the Cenotaph in Whitehall. A mile away at Hyde Park at midday, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign March is due to begin. Protesters will head past Victoria Station, across the river, and end up at the US Embassy at around 4 o'clock. One of the organisers of Saturday's march insisted that armistice ceremonies would be respected.
We knew we would be marching each Saturday if a ceasefire wasn't called. And some weeks ago, we said to the Met Police that on November the 11th, we would not want to be going anywhere near Whitehall or the Cenotaph.
At the heart of the standoff between the PM and the Commissioner is the operational independence of policing, which should be free of any political direction or influence. But no police chief wants to admit they might not be able to control their streets and keep people safe. Martin Brunt, Sky News.
Well, Sky correspondent Shaman Freeman-Powell is at New Scotland Yard for us. Shaman, what are the Met saying?
Well, it's been a stressful day, hasn't it, for Sir Mark Rowley today, having to cancel a pre-planned arrangement to give Prime Minister Rishi Sunak assurances on why this protest planned for this Saturday seemingly will still go ahead. And of course, these protests we've seen week on week ever since the 7th of October when Hamas launched that initial attack. But since then, every week here in the capital and across the country, thousands of people have been going on these protests, calling for an urgent ceasefire in Gaza. They say they are peaceful protests, and given the numbers, actually, there have been a small amount of arrests. However, these are protests that senior members of the government have described as hate marches and have called disrespectful, especially this protest planned for this Saturday, as it also falls on Armistice Day. So it's been an extremely stressful day for Sir Mark Rowley, who has had to defend his decision to allow these protests to go ahead. The force could have requested the power to ban the event under Section 13 of the Public Order Act, but this only happens if there is a threat of serious public disorder which could not be controlled by other measures. And Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, has made it clear that as it stands, the intelligence does not meet that threshold. Now, he had previously asked the organisers of this event this weekend to urgently reconsider the planned event because of the growing risk of violence and because of the fact that there's always a risk of breakaway groups causing issues. But the organisers have seemingly assured Sir Mark Rowley that they will respect the events of Armistice Day and that they have no intention of going anywhere near the cenotaph. So it seems that these reassurances have been laid back to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who has seemingly accepted that the planned protests will go ahead this weekend. But whatever happens, it's very clear that Sir Mark Rowley is the one that's going to be held to account.
Shaman, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm very pleased to say our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is here with us. So, John, is this about policing or is it about politics?
Both, really, obviously, because the Prime Minister, in his rather tetchy, I thought, 6-paragraph statement that came out at about 5 o'clock this afternoon, basically seems to be saying to Sir Mark, OK, you've won this battle, but if there's trouble on Saturday, it's your fault. He's still saying, Mr Sunak, that the planned protest is not just respectful, but it also offends our gratitude to the memory of people who died in the 2 world wars. Now, you have to say, is the Met Commissioner a good person to pick a fight with for a Prime Minister or a Home Secretary? I mean, the temperature in all this was raised dramatically when Suella Braverman came out with that phrase, hate marches. I remember listening to that interview, ooh, hate marches, that's a bit strong. And to make sure she got the point across, she used that phrase twice in that interview. So now the government has been, the last few days, trying to twist the Commissioner's arm to go to the Home Secretary and say, look, there's going to be serious public disorder, you've got to ban this march. Well, he has stood his ground, he's been defiant throughout, and he's won this battle, essentially. And as I say, it's a tetchy statement from the Prime Minister, where he's had to concede, OK, all right, the march can go ahead. But he is being quite petulant, I think, by saying, if there's any trouble, it's your fault.
Yeah, held accountable. We know what that means.
That was the phrase he used. But in other words, if it's trouble, it's your fault.
John, thank you very much indeed. John Craig there. Now, he was just talking about the phrase used by Suella Braverman. It does feel like by now almost every government minister has been asked if they agree with the Home Secretary when she described those rallies as hate marches. This answer, though, is worth listening to. Check out the reaction when the Foreign Office Minister, Andrew Mitchell, was asked about it in the House of Commons today.
Will the Minister distance himself from the description of the Palestine marchers as hate-filled? Yeah. Constituents I've been talking to are decent, law-abiding families with no truck at all with Hamas, but horrified by the scenes they're seeing, children killed and maimed day after day on their screens, and wanting it, as we all must, to stop. Will he distance himself from that description?
Minister? Well, the rights of protest are a much cherished right in this country, and of course, they are enshrined in law, and we respect that. In terms of what the Home Secretary said, we are all responsible for what we say, and she said it in the way that she did.
Pensions Minister Laura Trott is here. Good to have you on the programme today. So Rishi Sunak has said the march planned for Saturday, the 11th of November, is provocative and disrespectful. Do you think it is?
I think everybody in government wishes these marches weren't going ahead this weekend. I think it's a moment, both Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday, to actually pay our respects to veterans of this country. So nobody wants to see marches on the streets while that is happening.
But it's not while it's happening, though, is it? It's 2 hours after the minute silence, doesn't go near the cenotaph.
Yeah,
it's not either or, some would say.
No, I completely understand. I think we saw what happened, I think it was last weekend, when you had protesters who filled Charing Cross Station with the veterans who were sitting there just trying to sell poppies. Nobody wants to see that when veterans are travelling in and out of London. However, the police are operationally independent. Mark Rowley said today that he is happy for the march to go ahead, and they think that they can police that. And it's up for the government to then hold them to account.
What does that mean, hold them to account?
Well,
it sounds a little bit like, as John was saying, OK, you've won this battle, but if it goes wrong, it's on you.
No, it's the way it works. It's a very delicate balance, because the police are operationally independent, but they're overseen by the government, by politicians, which is as it should be. Politicians should not be making decisions about operational policing. But we are there to say, OK, let's see how this goes. Could we do it better? Are we doing this effectively? Are we doing it in line with what the public want? And that is, I think, the role the politicians should play.
I mean, I guess what the Met Police Commissioner is saying, he is going by what the law sets, right? So he's saying that, OK, they can ban a march, but only if there's a threat of serious disorder.
Absolutely.
A high threshold. It hasn't been met for 10 years.
Yes, absolutely.
And, if he bans it, there could be a judicial review. He'd have to show his evidence.
Quite right.
He's saying he hasn't got a choice.
Which is why proper processes should take place, as they have done. He has reached this decision.
Do you think it's the right decision?
I think it's for him to make the decision, as for the reasons that we just outlined. But it is right that also he keeps it under review, which is what he said that he's going to do in his statement today.
Would you describe the protests we've seen as hate marches?
Well, there have been some absolutely unacceptable elements to these marches. Elements
would you describe
which have made
them as hate marches?
I would not describe them as hate marches, but I would say that there are elements within it which have been completely unacceptable, and they have been hateful. They've made the Jewish community feel under threat in their own city, and there have been a number of arrests as a result.
But you wouldn't describe them as hate marches because you don't believe everyone on the protest is full of hate?
No.
Would you describe being homeless as a lifestyle choice?
I think what's important with this is that everybody wants homeless people to have a roof over their head. That's been the entire
Would you describe being homeless as a lifestyle choice?
No, I wouldn't.
Are you sick of journalists like me asking you whether you agree with controversial things that Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, have said?
I think the important thing is that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary are working together very effectively to do what actually matters to people at home. So people sitting there want illegal migration to go down. That's what they're working together on. They want crime to go down. That's what they're working together on. They want people to be safe on the streets. So the important things are being done, and being done very effectively together.
What is actually going on with Suella Braverman? Is she saying all the things that Rishi Sunak really thinks but is too scared to say? Or is she just freelancing? Is she going off, doing her own thing, grabbing the headlines as part of a leadership pitch?
No, she's being a very effective Home Secretary, bringing down illegal migration. It's down by a quarter this year. That's thanks to action that she's taken as Home Secretary.
You see, I don't believe that you are comfortable with the language she uses. You're saying you wouldn't describe them as hate marches. You say that you wouldn't describe homelessness as a lifestyle choice. I just don't believe you're comfortable with the rhetoric she's using.
What matters is government policy. That is the thing that...
But language matters as well, come on.
Of course, but what we're doing as a government, everybody is agreed on. And that is the steps that we're taking to end the homelessness in this country, to bring down illegal migration, as I said, and the steps we're taking this weekend to make sure that everybody's safe on the streets.
As Pensions Minister?
Yeah.
Is the pensions triple lock here to stay?
We are committed to the triple lock, Sophie, as I've said many times. I've been through this process. I've been in the job now for a year. So I was here last year in the build-up to when the decision has to be taken, because there is a process that we have to go through. You will know that last year we put up pensions by 10.1%. And all I can say for now is that we're committed to the triple lock.
Of course, we've got the autumn statement coming up. There's a bit of a debate about whether or not the pensions triple up will rise by average earnings, including bonuses, or not including bonuses.
Yeah.
I'll give us a hint.
As you can't, you know that I can't comment on that because there's a process ongoing at the moment by my boss, the Work and Pension Secretary, and I would get in a lot of trouble if I preempted that.
Is it fair that the state pension rose by 60% in cash terms between 2010 and 2023, compared by earnings only going up by 40%? Is that fair?
Well, look, we were addressing a problem where we had lots of pensioners in pensioner poverty. There are 200,000 fewer pensioners in pensioner poverty now than in 2010.
So maybe it's
and under Labour, it went up the pensions went up by 75p. That has not happened under this government. You know, we have got pensioners' backs, and that is why we have remained committed to triple lock. That's why we've done all the things that we've done this year to ensure that pensioners are as least affected as they can be by the cost of living crisis.
There's one other question I want to ask you. You're not on Twitter.
I'm not on Twitter.
Why not?
I don't particularly want to get rape threats every day.
Is that what you're experiencing?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's, you know, if you are a woman in public life, you have to decide which bits of social media you want to be on and ones that you don't. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I use those very effectively. I don't use Twitter for that reason.
Do you think that it's a malign influence on our politics?
I think it can be, particularly for women, yeah.
And people are perhaps running for MPs? Or...
yeah, I think it can be a very difficult place. I think more needs to be done to make sure that social media is safe for everybody, and particularly people in the public eye. I've seen what you get. It's horrible. It's really horrible, and it shouldn't happen. And actually, a lot of what we're doing in terms of the online safety bill will go some way to addressing that, and I think that's really important.
OK, it's been interesting to talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Laura Trott there. Now, I just heard Laura Trott talking about why the government is worried about Saturday's march. Not everyone agrees. Jeremy Corbyn said today the government should wake up and allow a peaceful march to go ahead.
We're watching in real time on television human life being destroyed with weapons, some of which have been in part supplied from this country. Can't our government just wake up to the simple humanitarian demand that millions of people in this country are making and will be making in a peaceful march on Saturday, not in competition with the Remembrance Weekend, but part and parcel of it. We're remembering the horror of all those that lost their lives in 2 world wars and many other wars, and trying to bring an end to this ghastly conflict to save life from being destroyed in Gaza and in anywhere else in the Middle East.
Well, let's discuss this a bit more, shall we? We're joined now by the former Defence Secretary Liam Fox and the columnist and author Owen Jones. Good to have you both on the programme. Liam, to you first. Do you think the march should go ahead on Saturday?
It is very clear it's a very delicate decision. On one hand, you've got public order to be considered. The Commissioner is clearly looking at that. But you've also got freedom of expression in our country, as Andrew Mitchell said in the House of Commons today. That's something we have to cherish. The difficulty, I don't think, lies in where the marches are, but getting to and from them, how you use public transport, how people are interfacing with veterans, for example, with some of the more hate-filled elements that we've seen. I was on the tube last weekend, the time of the march. The vast majority of people were extremely disciplined, were extremely well behaved. A tiny element they're causing a lot of trouble. The question is, will the police be able to guarantee that that tiny element won't get out of control and won't get out of the area where they're supposed to be, if it's possible for a peaceful march to go ahead that doesn't in any way disrespect or interfere with the Remembrance Day celebrations? That's fine. But it is a very difficult call, and I must say I do feel a bit for the Commissioner having to make what will be a very difficult decision, and the number of personnel he will have to commit to ensuring that he's not held responsible for a failure.
Are you going to go ahead on? Are you going to go on Saturday?
Yeah, of course I will. I've gone to every single demonstration, and they've overwhelmingly been peaceful. They're families with kids. They're from all walks of life: Muslims, Christians, Jews. Jewish protesters have always been a very important part. The Jewish bloc of this demonstration meets at the Simon Bolivar demonstration, and they're always one of the most vocal and enthusiastic parts of the demonstration. It's very clear what's happening. There's an attempt by those who feel, I would say, understandably morally exposed in government, because they are supporting a military onslaught which has now killed at least over 10,000 people, most of them women and children, well over 4,000 kids, children just like our own, who've died in often the most horrendous circumstances. And the idea is to try and shift the idea of who the real extremists are, that the real dangerous, hateful people are the people who oppose slaughtering children, and the people who are moderate statesmen are those who back what the United Nations calls collective punishment, and many are describing as crimes against humanity. And I think, you know, when we look at this and all the protests that have happened, they've overwhelmingly been peaceful. The biggest demonstration, up to 500,000 people. There were 10 arrests, far fewer than the average football match. And indeed, I don't understand the revision of history which is taking place in terms of the armistice when it arrives on a Saturday, as it sometimes does. Because what happens is this. I don't know if people remember. It does happen. It's happened several times in my lifetime. There was a 2-minute silence. We observed that, many of us. I think of my dead great-great-uncle who was mowed down on the Somme, my great-grandfather who died in the RAF during World War II, as many of us remember our relatives. And I remember all those who die in these hideous wars. And then what happens is life continues as normal. People go to football matches, where there may be fights, by the way, which I don't think people turn into a moral panic about Armistice Day. People go to pubs, people go to clubs. Life always continues as normal. There's never been a precedent where Armistice Day on a Saturday has been anything other than life always continuing. And what better day than Armistice Day to call for an armistice and an end to violence and war?
But you twice used the term overwhelmingly peaceful. The trouble is where we've not had the peaceful elements, where we have had the hate-filled elements. I've been in St Martin's Lane when people have been shouting anti-Jewish slogans. An old lady who happens to live a couple of doors from me, who is Jewish, whose family were in the Holocaust. You're talking about rewriting history. You've got to be sensitive to these things, that understand that people are genuinely fearful because of what happened before. And it may well be an overwhelmingly peaceful march. The question is, can that not peaceful element be contained, and can it operate in a way where you will have a lot of veterans, a lot of old people, a lot of Jewish people in London who will feel intimidated by that? People should not feel afraid on our streets. Now, I'm all for peaceful protest, I'm all for freedom of expression. The point I'm making is that it's the police, therefore, make the balance between whether they think they can maintain public order and public safety. And that safety includes people not feeling terrified to be out on the streets of London.
I mean, to be clear, there will be veterans, elderly people and Jewish people on the protest. I think if people turn up to the protest, they will essentially see what is a family day out and a cross-section of our communities, not the image that has been portrayed by our politicians and by the media itself. If we're going to go down the route, Liam, which you're going to go down, of trying to say that, and you're talking about people using hate, then if we're going to do that, then we could not only just go through random Conservative activists and the way they behave on Twitter and hold you collectively responsible
this is nonsense.
for them.
This is nothing to
but
do
not
with
only
this,
that, not only that, Suella Braverman herself talking about hate marches when she has been rightly herself held to account for demonising and speaking about migrants and refugees in the most hate-filled way possible. It's just an absurdity. Obviously, at a football match, for example, any football match, you will get a few idiots. You don't therefore hold all of those football fans responsible. If you have 500,000 people on the streets, you will get some idiots which are not representative, but we don't use that to shut down football matches, and we don't use it to shut down the Conservative Party either.
To be fair, I don't think Liam Fox is saying the march should be shut down.
No, I'm not, but I'm just saying he's talking about the arguments that are being used against it.
This is a hysterical lefty rant. What we're talking about are real people on my street who were terrified by people saying, end Israel. And these are people who remember what the Holocaust was.
Yeah, and I think it's...
And I think that you can't possibly be defending that sort of behaviour.
I think it's...
Are you?
Obviously not. I'm saying it's insulting, not least to the Jewish protesters who will be there, the Jewish bloc, who always march, to suggest they would ever take part in a demonstration. Many of them, by the way, who I know personally, who lost relatives in the Holocaust, the idea for 1 second they would take part voluntarily in a protest which in any way backs up those sorts of hate and harassment of Jewish people is offensive.
But they will be there on this march because they were on the last march.
Well, but you could say that about any large group of people. And then we'd have to just shut down every large group of people.
We are out of time. We'll have more space for discussion later in the programme. Thank you both for a very lively debate. Thank you. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Protect our NHS, save lives, sack Matt Hancock. The COVID inquiry hears some officials had completely lost confidence in the Health Secretary during the pandemic.
The pound has rallied. Moderation. Interest rates peaking.
Up at 6%.
The highest for 14 years.
Will that be the peak? Will it be a little bit lower?
Crisis. It's closer to a potential crash.
So many words, so many meanings. But what do they mean for you and your finances? Stay up to date on Sky News.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. Coppers have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police. Made by people who dare to challenge. Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why? Meeting you. Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
Hello, welcome back. Now, as ever, you can follow the day's big political developments on our digital politics hub. There's lots more on today's top story here. The row over the weekend's protest. Labour MP talking about here, saying we must stop inflaming this situation and look at how we can bring people together. It has a bit more details on Labour's Stella Creasy defending the march on grounds of free speech. She's spoken to Sky News and she's basically saying that free speech is long cherished, but it's always qualified by that you don't have the right to intimidate people. But people feel strongly about Gaza, have a right to be heard. That there from Stella Creasy. Let's have a look at some of the stories on the hub today. Shall we? This one. This is a new pay deal by the RMT, so the rail union members, to vote on a new pay offer to stop strikes over Christmas. So a bit of hope there that there could be an end to the strikes. We'll be talking to Mick Lynch later on the programme, the RMT boss, so definitely worth hanging around for that interview. Plus, finally, always one of my favourite toys to play with on the hub, our pledge tracker is... This is where you can keep an eye on the Prime Minister's pledges, how Rishi Sunak is getting on with some of those promises that he made back in January. He's going to be judged on those in the coming election. Now, we don't know when the election is going to be, but there is speculation it could be as soon as next May. So he's running out of time to meet the pledges. So do have a look at that at home. You can check out all the different ones, see how he's getting on. Plus, if you scan the QR code, you can catch up with all of the latest on the hub throughout the day. Now to the COVID inquiry, because today the inquiry heard from the former Cabinet Secretary Lord Sedwill, who said that he wanted Matt Hancock to be sacked as Health Secretary during the pandemic. He also expressed concern about the former minister's candour in his handling of the pandemic, saying it was clearly damaging that multiple officials had lost confidence in him during COVID. Sky's political correspondent Tamara Cohen reports.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
He was the face of the pandemic. But the inquiry has been told that Matt Hancock's confidence veered into overconfidence, promises into over-promises. The head of the civil service said he felt the health secretary was a big problem. He told colleagues Hancock should be sacked and even shared his view with Boris Johnson that a change of direction was needed.
You told the Prime Minister to sack Mr. Hancock.
I don't think I used that word with him, but I did use it in a WhatsApp with Simon Case.
And you described it thus: to save lives and protect the NHS.
That was gallows humour. That's an echo. I mean, and I realise, of course, inappropriate even in a private exchange. Not something I would have ever expected to be public. These were, as I've just expressed, conversations about Mr. Hancock. I don't think I would have used the word sack with the Prime Minister himself, although I acknowledge I said it to Mr. Case. But he would have been under no illusions as to my view.
Boris Johnson, the inquiry has been told, does not believe he was told to remove the Health Secretary, who would stay in post for another year. Matt Hancock's spokesman said he would respond to all questions when he gives his evidence.
Lord Sedwill paints a picture of trouble at the top. Small groups of people taking key decisions during a crisis they were ill prepared for. At one point, he describes Boris Johnson's advisers as brutal and useless and accuses them of behaving like a dictatorship.
As the most senior official in government during the first wave of the pandemic, he became infuriated by hostile briefings against him, including a claim he'd described the COVID strategy in early March, which was then herd immunity, as like a chickenpox party, to the horror of Number 10 staff. Today, he apologised.
At no point did I believe that coronavirus was only of the same seriousness of chickenpox. I knew it was a much more serious disease. That was not the point I was trying to make. These were private exchanges, and I certainly had not expected this to become public. And I understand how, and in particular, the interpretation that's been put on it, that it must have come across that someone in my role was both sort of heartless and thoughtless about this, and I genuinely am neither. But I do understand the distress that must have caused, and I apologise for that because it certainly wouldn't have been my intention, and of course I wasn't the one who made it public.
Lord Sedwill would leave Number 10 in the late summer of that first year. His successor was Simon Case, who was to find Downing Street even harder to bring into line. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, at the COVID inquiry.
Still to come on the Politics Hub. The first Labour frontbencher to quit over Gaza says he does it with a heavy heart. Can Keir Starmer hold the party together, or will others follow? Hello, welcome back. Now, 3 trade unions have pledged to join next weekend's pro-Palestine march, with their bosses posting a clip on social media declaring their support for the march.
Hello, I'm Mick Lynch from the RMT. I'll be marching on Saturday and speaking to the demonstration for peace in Palestine.
Hi, I'm Matt Rack from the FBU. We'll be marching on Saturday, calling for a ceasefire.
Hi, I'm Daniel Kebedy. I'm from the NEU, and I will also be marching on Saturday, calling for a ceasefire and peace in the Middle East.
Well, as we just heard, one of those men was the RMT boss, Mick Lynch, who joins us now. Thank you very much for being on the programme. I do want to talk about the marches, but I want to start with the rail strikes that we've seen rumbling on for many, many months now. Is there a breakthrough on the cards?
Well, we've got a proposal today that we are putting to a referendum of our members in the 14 companies. It offers a standalone pay rise without the conditions that the government has been pressing. You've heard about the ticket office closures, but they also wanted driver-only operation. They wanted to extend working hours and all sorts of other matters. So this pay offer is a very modest offer, and we're not jumping up and down about it. But it does contain a considerable amount of back pay for maybe up to 20 months. And our members will look at that now over the next 2 or 3 weeks. They'll get a vote on it. And if they decide they want to accept it, we'll get that back pay and we'll move into a set of discussions in the new year, going through till April. So it's a 6-month pause, if you like, in this process where there'll be no changes imposed on us and we can discuss what the companies want. But basically, the government has had to do a U-turn since their massive defeat over ticket offices and other matters. And they've now made us a proposal that's not conditional on ripping up our members' contracts of employment and making thousands of people redundant. So we've got a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies through to the end of next year, something that we were told we would never get by the pundits and people in the media, that we'd never achieve such an agreement. And we've got a proposal now that just does that. But it's a very modest pay offer, so our members will think very seriously about that. But if they do accept it, there's no need for strikes. And we will go into a period of 6 months where we're discussing the issues.
So you're saying you're not jumping up and down about it. You're saying it's for your members to decide. But just to be clear, are you recommending this to your members? Do you think that they should vote for it?
No, we are not recommending it. It's a neutral vote. They will get all of the documentation. They will get the agreements. They will get an understanding of it from myself and the union's leadership, and they will decide what they want to do with it. But
How would you vote? How would you vote?
It's below inflation. How will I vote? I don't get a vote.
No, but I'm saying, how would you vote?
Well, if I was a member, a rank and file member, I'd read the documentation and make my decision when I've received it all. I've been at the negotiating table, so I know what's in it. But if I was a rank and file member, I'd make a decision based on what I read and what I think about it.
You've seen it, so go on. How would you vote if you had a vote?
Well, I'll ask people that want to vote on it. It's my position is I carry out the instructions of my executive, and it's a neutral vote.
OK. You are also going to be attending some of the pro-Palestine marches this weekend. Now, there's a very, very live debate in Westminster about whether or not the march should go ahead. You have, of course, lots of people who think that, look, if you can't march for peace on Remembrance Sunday, when can you do it? On Remembrance Day, on Saturday, I should say. Other people saying that at a time when people are paying their respects, it's a very, very sensitive and emotional weekend for so many of us. It's not the time for a march. Why are you there?
Well, the RMT will be very respectful. We have got active members serving on Royal Fleet Auxiliary ships off the coast of Palestine and Israel at the moment, serving the military and the Navy. So we are very respectful, and we will be taking part in memorials this weekend at railway stations and, of course, to the Merchant Navy, who we represent in this country, going back through 2 world wars and all sorts of conflicts. So we are very mindful of that situation. And of course, many of our members who have been on strike and are involved in our union are veterans themselves. So we're very respectful of that situation. And this march has been arranged in the assembly at the American Embassy, away from the cenotaph, away from the main activities. It's taking place after the 2-minute silence at 11 o'clock. It will have no interference with that. The police have said it's a lawful march and it will take place. And I'm confident that it will be respectful and it will be separate from those situations. There are football matches, there are shopping going on, there is all sorts of activities going on Saturday, and it's never been a day where the country comes to a stop. So, having said that, we will be taking part in a solidarity expression. Our solidarity is with peace. We condemn the murder of the Israeli citizens in early October. We condemn the overreaction and the disproportionate response by the Israeli army and military onto the people of the Gaza Strip. We want to see peace. We want peace for all of the peoples of the region, and we want that peace to come quickly. So we want everybody to stop fighting. Hamas, the Israeli army, we want to get some supplies, emergency medical aid and food and water and all the rest of it into the people of Gaza. And we want the peacemakers to be encouraged and not the warmongers. So that's why we will be there. We are looking for a ceasefire. And of course, these wars ended with ceasefires, and you build the peace once you've got that armistice and peace in place.
OK, thank you very much, Mick Lynch there of the RMT. Well, let's talk now more about Labour, shall we? Because late last night, the Bradford MP Imran Hussain became the first frontbencher to resign over his party's leadership's position on Gaza. Well, actually, political correspondent John Craig is back with us twice in one show. We've really spoiled this evening, John. How much of an issue are these splits within the Labour Party?
Well, things are getting worse for Sir Keir Starmer because the SNP have put the Labour Party on the spot tonight in the last hour or so. Now, the SNP have tabled an amendment to the King's Speech motion. And, of course, as you can imagine, they are calling for an immediate ceasefire. It's backed by all the SNP MPs, by their friends in Plaid Cymru as well. And assuming, it's not a particularly big assumption, that Sir Lindsay Hoyle calls that amendment. They are the largest party, it's third largest party, a lot of names on it. How many Labour backbenchers will support it? Now, you just mentioned the resignation of Imran Hussain. I'm not convinced there's going to be more resignations from the front bench, because if you look at the list of 20 front benchers who've called for a ceasefire, I mean, Imran Hussain is probably about the most left-wing of the lot. Paid up Corbynista. He once turned down money from Tony Blair to his election campaign, and a fully throated Corbynista, whereas a lot of the others, people like Jess Phillips and so on, they're pretty loyal, a lot of the front benchers. But this move by the SNP creates a problem for Sir Keir, because if there's going to be a vote on that SNP amendment in a few days' time, calling for a ceasefire, then lots of Labour backbenchers could pile in there. The front benchers probably won't. But it's, I think, probably more on the backbenches he's got a problem than his own front bench. So far, he's been quite successful in holding the line, not doing too well amongst councillors. I interviewed the leader of Burnley Council the other night. And,
that was a fiery one.
Well, it wasn't that fiery. He made a very reasoned case, to be fair. But there is dissent in the party, and it could stoke up in the next few days and create even more problems for Sir Keir if there's a vote in the Commons.
Interesting.
Although senior people in the party say, oh, it's all very well people putting their names to an early day motion. When it comes to voting in the Commons, not so many will do that.
Thank you very much, John. John Craig there. Well, let's just pick up now, shall we, with Liam Fox and Owen Jones. Owen, I'm interested to hear from you about what you make about Labour's position on this. How much of an issue do you think it is?
Well, look, Keir Starmer will become Prime Minister just because the Conservative Party has essentially imploded as a political force. From the number of Prime Ministers they've had, cost of living crisis, collapsing NHS, we could go on, really. I think the issue for him is that what's going on with Keir Starmer in his electoral coalition is he is becoming a hate figure in sections of it in a way that took Tony Blair years when he was actually Prime Minister. Keir Starmer's in opposition.
You're talking about the left, you basically.
Well, most people in the country don't think in terms of left or right. That's for geeks like us.
How would you describe it then?
Well, firstly, obviously there are 4 million Muslim voters, Muslim citizens of the country. A large chunk of those are voters. Obviously, the children don't count there, but there are a large number of Muslims. The Labour leadership has panicked about that because they treat I would say, British Muslims often as voting fodder, where there's not much of a... many British Muslims feel disrespected, that they're expected to march out and vote for the Labour Party however they're treated by the leadership. But I think the mistake there is to think that anger about the mass slaughter of thousands of innocent people is concentrated amongst British Muslims. If you look at these demonstrations, for example, hundreds of thousands of people from all backgrounds, I'll be blunt, I don't think they're natural Conservative voters. Many of those are Labour voters. And we saw what happened with the Iraq war, that toxified Tony Blair amongst many people who would otherwise regard themselves as Labour voters. And I think that same process is happening here. That's why you're seeing various Labour MPs getting edgy. Look, I'll take Wes Streeting, for example. Wes Streeting is, I would say, an ultra-Blairite. And you can see him becoming nervous and edgy about the Labour leadership's position, even though he refuses to condemn, for example, in interviews, Israeli war crimes as determined by lawyers and UN officials, because he has large numbers of Muslims in his constituency who went out and protested. But it's not just Muslim voters, it's others who just don't like the sight of innocent children being massacred. So I think the problem with Keir Starmer has just finally is he'll become Prime Minister, but he'll already be very unpopular amongst people who voted Labour in order to kick out the Conservatives.
Interesting. Liam, we were talking a bit before the programme about the war in the Middle East. You're going to the region, I think, next week, you were saying. And you were talking about how your concern is that people aren't talking enough about the long-term stability of the region. I just wondered if you wanted to talk a bit more about that.
Well, a number of points. First of all, not once have we had a mention of the children being held hostage by Hamas at the present time, goodness knows where, in what tunnels in Gaza. It's being neglected utterly by the left. I've not heard Labour MPs talking about it, which I think is important, because the problem for Keir Starmer is it's the ghost of Jeremy Corbyn coming back to haunt his party, and the associations that many voters had with Jeremy Corbyn. He's a man who's been denied his speaking place by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in Germany because he has not unequivocally condemned what Hamas did. So even the German...
That's not true. You can't just say things on television which aren't true.
The reason given by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, the German left, was his position on Hamas. So
he condemned Hamas.
The German left find the British left, in that sense, unpalatable. So Keir Starmer's got a problem because it reminds us of Corbyn and the problems Labour had with anti-Semitism under Corbyn and so on. The wider issue, I think, is what we need to be focusing on, because Ehud Olmert, former Prime Minister of Israel, gave a very interesting interview, I thought, today, saying that this idea that Israel would occupy or would be permanently responsible for security in Gaza is not a tenable position. It's why Israel got out of there in 2005. So if Israel's not going to take control, who's going to take control? It can only ultimately be the Palestinian Authority. What is the international community going to do to ensure that this time that's successful? How is reconstruction of Gaza going to occur? And how do we ensure that the cancer that is Hamas, which, remember, is a proxy for Iran, largely, it does not pose a threat to ordinary Iranian citizens in the way that they have done, they are doing today, and they will do if they are allowed to be in place.
Just on that, firstly, just as a matter of fact, Jeremy Corbyn has repeatedly condemned Hamas and its massacre. It's just not true to say otherwise. But the second point is, look, I have to say this, Liam, let's just be brutally honest. People like yourself brought us Afghanistan. You said anyone who criticised the occupation that went on for 2 decades were Taliban stooges, and we ended up with the Taliban stronger than ever. The same with Iraq. We were told we were stooges of Saddam Hussein. We had the blood and chaos and hundreds of thousands of people and Islamist extremism on the rampage. You gave us Libya, we got a failed state.
Are you going to say anything about Gaza? Or are we just going to get this teenage hysterical rant?
It's not teenage hysteria to use historical precedent to point out that every single time we have been told these military onslaughts are necessary, they end in a greater catastrophe. And there's no basis for counterinsurgency programmes succeeding in this way.
No substance whatsoever,
but there is
which is exactly what would expect.
Well, you don't like your record being obviously discussed because you know it's going to be the same
because
with
Hamas. I'm really sorry, and I know that you two have got so much to say to each other. Maybe you can go and have a drink after the programme and fight it out in the pub.
Don't drink during the week.
Let's go to the break. But we will have more from you in a different note after the break, because we were talking a bit earlier about Imran Hussein quitting. A big deal for him, but is Imran Hussein even a household name in his own household? That's where Google comes in. What we're asking is being Googled a sign of success? That is next.
Apparently, there's a spike that's recorded at the end of August. Like, it's not
What?
huge, but a noticeable spike. Apparently, Deezer was saying last year in their streaming numbers that there's a noticeable spike at the start of August. But then, yeah, literally, once Halloween is out the way, we now have a 2-month period of
47 days to go until Christmas.
there's like 47 listening days to classic Christmas records, it seems, because they just grow and grow and grow right up until Christmas Day. It's on streaming.
This is one of my particular favourites. Oh, we all remember that. Do you remember, is that one of yours?
Yeah, I mean, that's one interesting, and one that didn't get to number one and then has gone on to have this extended life as being, a kind of a Christmas perennial.
I care about that one.
Dawn Chandra's Christmas song, yeah. I mean, The Darkness, that again was that was that strange number one race we had at Christmas, where it was them with this very, very Christmassy song versus Mad World, the cover, the really dark Donnie Darko song. Yeah,
I like this one.
Fantastic song. Written by the same chap who wrote Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So, I mean, what a Christmas record.
That is a fantastic fact.
Yeah, Johnny Marks, yeah. So, I mean, a huge, in her career, obviously, massive, massive song. But, I mean, she went on to be inducted into the Country Hall of Fame. And, again, it's sort of interesting to have these artists who have these huge careers and yet will be known for this one song.
He was a big name in back in his day, wasn't he?
I saw him play Glastonbury about 5-6 years ago.
Did you?
Yeah, he was there.
Green Door was him, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. Apparently this was Prince William's favourite Christmas song.
I don't get it.
So this makes the point about how Christmas has become it makes a lot of money now for the music industry. In the past, it would be maybe Christmas albums that were brand new or songs played in shops and places like that. Now we're streaming this kind of record. They think that the global royalties is over $60 million for this in its lifetime, and it makes it like $500,000 every year because people now stream these songs.
Yeah.
And so whereas this catalogue would sit there and Christmas music would only be once a year, now it's you've got this whole period of just making money, and it is, because of the streams, people are already talking it up as a potential number one.
Welcome back. Now, we've been talking tonight about the resignation of Imran Hussain, the shadow Levelling Up minister who quit Labour's front bench over Gaza. Now, Harry Cole, the Sun's political editor, posted a bit of a cheeky tweet earlier suggesting he wasn't exactly a household name and saying that there was a sudden spike in newsrooms across Britain Googling who he was. Now, what this graph shows is the relative change in interest from people searching the web for Imran Hussain over time. You can see that late last night there was a huge spike as people were suddenly Googling him, everyone suddenly trying to work out who he was. So it got us thinking here on the Politics Hub about our guest tonight. When the eyes of the World Wide Web has been upon them. So, Liam, we're going to go for you first. Let's have a look at your graph. This is your Google Trends. Liam said that he doesn't look at his notifications over social media, very sensible. But here we go. So you can see your peak was a few years ago. That's back in 2019, April 2019. And we had a little look at what that could be. And it was actually, if we look at the next picture, now that was at the height of the Brexit crisis. So it was when you were International Trade Secretary, you can see there with your red folder, and you were a bit worried that Britain would end up in a customs union. So that is when everyone was trying to work out who Liam Fox was, what was going on there.
Fetching.
Next up, Owen Jones. One big peak over this year we found for you was a bit more recently. It was about the start of October, just last month. That was actually around the time when you were on this programme.
I remember with
You probably do
Hodge.
remember.
Bless.
Here we go.
Yeah. That's when I spent.
Running high.
That's when I spent 2 minutes condemning Hamas's atrocity and the massacre they committed against Israeli civilians, and then she said I didn't, which is just interesting because you could hear me say
there was a big debate online going on there. But what I was also told, my producers, it's only fair if you look at myself and see when I peaked as well. So yeah, my peak there, you can see, was in the summer.
What happened? What did you do, Sophie?
Well, it was actually when I was announced as host of this programme.
Oh, of course, well, yeah.
So maybe loads of people Googling who on earth is Sophy Ridge, or maybe it's my mum just kind of Google searching my own name. That is also definitely a possibility there.
That's a sweet picture. That's a very cute picture.
That was the last ever Sophy Ridge on Sunday.
Oh, you look quite sad, like quite mournful. Like end of an era face.
It was a bit of it did feel like an end of an era. But to be honest, it's been good doing this. You know, I've been very happy doing the weeknight show as well. So you don't look at your social media notifications, then, Liam?
Not really. I mean, I will have a look now and again, but people say, it must be dreadful, the things that people who don't like you say about you on social media. Well, don't read them. You know, it's one of the things that I feel very strongly about kids. Part of teaching them resilience about social media is to not read things they don't need to read. This obsession, you know, if you're walking along the street now and people bump into you all the time because they've got their face stuck in their phone, we don't need to be listening and reading about what other people think about us all the time. It's not a healthy attitude for people to have. I think it's especially not healthy for children.
Do you Google yourself?
No, I don't Google myself. Try to avoid doing that on my work. I mean,
you know who you are.
Well, just about. Occasionally, I think, am I Macaulay Culkin? Look at I'm Macaulay Culkin. I do know who I am. No, I set my notifications to it, so it's only people I follow. But sometimes what I do is I dip into my mentions. But I had to get kind of a hazmat suit on.
Yeah.
Get ready because I mean, I guess it's just. Particularly in the last few years, I think things have changed. I mean, some of it's kind of just quite crude homophobia. I don't mind where they say the homophobia if it was just a bit more creative. A lot of it's just kind of like bland,
it's very
kind of based.
Insults.
Like, be creative with the homophobia.
Yeah, if you're
that
going to insult me, make it funny.
Yeah, exactly. Just jazz it up a little bit.
Careful what you wish for.
Well, yeah, that's true. If you're wondering what the acronym is, I'm told by Daryl, my much more switched-on producer, let me Google that for you. I would have had no idea. That says up. That's all from us tonight. See you tomorrow at 7.